Hi everybody, and welcome to another of our Helping People with Multiple Needs webinars. You can see we've got quite a panel of people here, so I thought we'd just do some introductions. I'll start. I'm Liz Cracknell, and I'm one of the joint program leads for AMBIT, which is Adaptive Mentalisation Based Integrative Treatment here at the Anna Freud National Centre for Children and Families. And Peter, if you want to say hello.
I'm Peter Fugel. I'm one of the AMBIT team here, and today at this webinar I'm just going to be what we call manualising, just taking notes of the key themes that come out of the discussion.
James.
Hello, my name's James Fairbairn and I'm part of the AMBIT training team at the Anna Freud Centre, and I'm going to be responding to questions and welcoming people as they come in and join. So hiya.
Other James.
Hello, I'm James Wheeler. I'm going to be co-hosting and doing some reflection on the discussion a little bit later on in the webinar.
Rebecca?
So I'm Rebecca Smith, part of the AMBIT team, and I'm going to be helping with the Q&A box, so the questions.
And then our very special guests who have joined us at, frankly, a ridiculous time in the morning, Brisbane time. Aaron.
Hi, I'm Arun Pillai. I'm one of the child psychiatrists from Brisbane. We've recently started a campus-based adolescent extended treatment unit and introduced AMBIT to the team. And I'll be talking about sort of why AMBIT and how we see AMBIT and getting a new team trained in AMBIT and our experience with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Michael.
Yeah, hi. It's from Brisbane, Australia. I'm Michael Daubney, a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I'm the statewide director of AMIOS, which is the Assertive Mobile Youth Outreach Service. And I'm also an Anna Freud Centre accredited MBT supervisor.
Thank you. And we've also here got some other members of the AMBIT programme here, Laura, Marianne and Cheryl. I don't know if you want to introduce yourselves or just turn your camera on and wave. There we go. We have some nice waving. Lovely. Yeah. So yeah, we're all here. So I just wanted really to introduce a little bit our theme for today. But one thing to say is thank you for joining us. If you've been joining us previously, we've been doing these on Microsoft Teams live event. We've moved over to Zoom webinars. We hope we can get a little bit more interaction going in the chat box. So you'll notice there's two areas where you can send us a message. One is the Q&A, and that's really for questions that you'd like to be put to us, and particularly to Aaron and Michael, that you'd like us to ask. Or if you want to send a private question to us, if you're having sort of problem hearing or something, let us know and we'll try and help. But then in the chat box, if you want to maybe introduce yourself, say what your role is, where you work, and you can kind of talk with one another there. And yeah, we'll also send messages to Rebecca and James Fairbairn, who are sort of manning the chat box if you like. So that would be good. So what we're thinking about this time, particularly, is the extent to which we can or should be, whoever we are in the sort of helping system, influence system change. And I just kind of had a few prompts to get us thinking about why we might want to do that and to what extent it's our job to do that. So this is Lucy, and she's got a number of different problems going on. So she's not got enough money, she's experiencing some abuse at home, she's experienced a sexual assault, she's feeling low, she's currently sofa surfing at the moment because things at home are intolerable, school isn't going well, and she's using a lot of weed, which in her mind is one thing that she's trying to do to manage this. So let's say this is me, and I've chosen someone with appropriately blonde hair, and I'm a CAMS worker, and I go, okay, well, my job is to help you with feeling low. So I'm going to throw these particular acronyms at you. So I'm an RMN, I'm from CAMS, we're going to do a CPA, we're going to do some CBT, and we're going to do, I made up HDS, FD, I have no idea what it means, but just to make the point. And, you know, in doing so, I'm absolutely fulfilling my job description, and I'm providing an evidence-based treatment for the particular thing that Lucy is kind of presenting with to me. But with each of these other problems, there's this kind of gang of other workers too, and they all go, yeah, I'm here to help too. And they've all got this evidence-based kind of really helpful, really well-intentioned treatment that comes with their own little set of kind of acronyms and all the rest of it. And this isn't to criticize that. Clearly each of us goes to work to try to help. And each of us is delivering something that is absolutely within our role that we're supposed to be delivering. But you can see that for Lucy, who actually, hearing about some of what's been going on for her, has good reasons to find it maybe hard to trust people and develop the sort of trusting relationships that are required to work on some of these issues. So actually, as a system, despite our excellent kind of individual bits, we're offering something that's like a whole gang of people kind of around Lucy. So some of you will have joined because you've had a training in AMBIT, or you're interested in AMBIT. And for those that don't know much about it, AMBIT stands for Adaptive Mentalisation Based Integrative Treatment. And really it's a team approach to help teams to make help more helpful. But if we think about what AMBIT means as a word rather than another acronym, it means sphere of influence. And I guess that's what we're thinking about in today's webinar is, you know, depending for each of you, you'll be in different sort of positions within a local or national helping system. What is your sphere of influence? So I guess these aren't questions that we're necessarily going to answer, but that I think are interesting to think about is, well, if I'm this CAMS worker or if I'm this housing worker, is fixing the system my job? And I guess it's probably, unless you're a commissioner or a kind of very senior manager or a policy maker, it perhaps isn't explicitly your job. But if we think about the fact that our job is to help our clients of whatever age with a particular thing, I guess we've got to think about the overall impact of the wider system and how effective our particular intervention can be if it is just one of a number of interventions being offered by different teams. And I guess the other question just to be thinking about is, of the work that we do, which are the activities that we really value and that we measure in our services? And I'm guessing that for many, the answer will be, well, the things that we really measure and see as most important is the face-to-face work with clients. And, you know, this webinar isn't about saying that that isn't important, but I guess, you know, in terms of the overall outcomes for Lucy, would 2 hours over a number of weeks on the phone with a social worker to make sure that we're offering kind of something reasonably coordinated, might that be as valuable as, you know, 2 hours that I might spend with Lucy herself? What about the kind of things where I go to a networking event so that I've met Sally from housing? And we kind of, when we introduced this topic on Twitter over the last couple of days for this webinar, someone replied saying, well, systems are complicated, but systems are made up of people. Systems are made up of relationships. And so very often it's, you know, that I'm working, it's not the housing department that I think about. It's when I've met Sally and I know people in those different departments that actually I can think more broadly about the whole system. So this is just thinking about, quite rightly, you know, commissioners and people who commission our services are interested in that face-to-face work that we do, and about that being, you know, part of an evidence-based modality for the particular problem that a person is presenting with. But I guess we're just thinking about, are some of the other things, could they, in the grand scheme of things, even if they're not, even if they don't directly feel like they're what's in our job description, might they overall be helping our clients? can we all play a part in making the helping systems around young people more helpful? And I guess what we're going to hear from Aaron and Michael might be about some of what has been done differently in the face-to-face work with clients, but actually an awful lot of effort has been put into training and implementing things that may ultimately, well, we'll hear, have made the system more helpful. So the last thing is just to think about how we might influence system change. You might be a commissioner, and I think James Wheeler, who's my co-host today, might be able to say a little bit about his experience of creating system change for just the sorts of young people like Lucy in his role as a commissioner in the past. But we might also hear from people maybe in the chat box about guerrilla system change that actually we can achieve from the bottom up or from wherever we are within the system. So I'm going to turn off these little bits of slides around me if I can. Yes, I think they've gone. And yeah, kind of reintroduce Michael and Aaron. And again, just thank you so much for joining us. I think it is about 2:45 in the morning for you. And I have to say, if that was me, the chance of me saying anything reasonably sensible is pretty unlikely. So I'm impressed already that you're here. So yeah, I wonder if you just want to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in Brisbane and across the state. It seems you're sharing your screen there, Michael. Have you got some...
sorry about that. I'm just having a bit
right.
of trouble getting mine up. Here we are. Oops, sorry about that. No, it's the wrong one. There we go. My health district is a bit, is very keen on us always using a certain backdrop, so sorry about that. So thanks everyone. I guess what part of the issues that Liz is raising is, can we influence change actually across a system, actually at a state level, in one of my roles actually. Just for people who have been unlucky enough not yet to visit Australia, Ron and I are currently from Queensland, which is the state that's highlighted in maroon, which is the state's colours. And to give you an idea of the reach of the services that I'm connected with, that I supervise and direct, there's 15 sites across the state, which really run from up North Queensland, quite high in Cairns, right down to the border, the Gold Coast, basically. So there's quite a reach. Look, key messages, I guess, sort of from the talk, is the importance of mentalising aloud my colleagues' dilemma first in all meetings that we're actually in. We've actually introduced that since Dickon visited us last year, basically. The importance of the use of straightforward language. That's actually as much for people above us as it is sort of with our clients as well. The relevance of actually having an elevator pitch about what you actually do, and also very straightforward language in trying to describe mentalisation and non-mentalisation. We've actually found CORE has been a good working knowledge of mentalisation, AMBIT, and also actually MBT as well. Something Liz has referred to as a leadership style that's both reflective and a bottom-up led, but top-down supported. And perhaps thinking about it, is it possible actually to try and manage upwards at times, basically? The importance of having a coherent model of care, basically. Look, people who knew me 10 years ago might sort of smile when I stress the importance actually of data, and also how we value feedback. And I give some illustrations about how we actually actively do that in our job, in our teams, basically. And also the dilemma or the challenge of embedding the structures and people needed but also local adaptations across the 14 sites, but still having statewide supervision, training and fidelity as well. Okay. So AMIOS, as said, stands for Assertive Mobile Youth Outreach Service. It provides assertive community treatment for families of adolescents with severe and persistent mental health problems who can't be engaged through our usual CIMS. CAMs over here are called KIMS. Actually, it's called differently in each state in Australia. AMIOS clinicians work flexibly to engage adolescents and their family in an individualised plan to reduce risk of harm, support recovery, improve overall functioning, and improve engagement with education and vocational pathways. So Arun and I we're part of actually what's called the Adolescent Extended Treatment Services that came about following the closure of a subacute medium stage unit about 6 years ago now, and subsequent commission of inquiry reported, which endorsed a number of recommendations, including the implementation of evidence-based model of care to ensure young people and their families across Queensland have an integrated continuum of care for extended mental health treatment and rehabilitation in Queensland. It provides medium to long-term developmentally appropriate quality treatment. So Arun's actually part of the service. He's sort of director of the newly opened subacute beds, which is on one side you can see the 5. We're the assertive community part, and there's 3 other parts too. There's day programs, youth residentials, and step up, step down. So I just want giving bare bones of the context where we work in. So AMIOS is a service provided throughout Queensland, initially managed by the district I'm employed by, what's called CHQ, which is in Brisbane, for the first 5 years. And we started in 2014. We actually started as me sitting in a cubicle sort of 5 years ago. And we've sort of expanded now, as I said, to 14 sites. And referral to AMIOS is made by community CAMS teams. So that just gives you an idea of sort of the size of it. Look, even before the pandemic, we were actively using video conferencing. So I supervise every site every 2 weeks. And apart from the Brisbane site that I'm physically in, everything has been for 5 years by video conference as well. So Queensland has had to, due to the size, been using technology for years. Look, at a bigger picture, as Liz was saying, look, are they this is slightly at the high level, but there is relevance to, are there things structurally that can help our AMBIT at our level? And we actually feel statewide, there's been 4 things that have been very helpful. There's been the statewide governance and leadership. So there's my role and another role, which there's a statewide coordinator role. There's literally partnerships. There's sort of agreements, basically. So we have some capacity where we're able to discuss with the management of the HHSs if needs be. We have a highly qualified and capable workforce. And importantly, coming back to this concept of a shared framework, which AMBIT is very central in, as I think you'll find out from myself and Arun how it's done in both of our services. So I'll give you an example of model of care. It needs to be clearly articulated with those features, basically. We don't have to dwell on it. People will be aware of this. Again, our eligibility criteria are very explicit as well. Age between 13 and 18, and importantly, they are difficult to engage, high risk behaviour, and require a level of support that can't be met in the current community services, non-ambulatory services. So we're assertive and we're outreach. So to give you an idea, on our documents, there's what our underlying fundamental principles. None of this is out of the box. We just actually make sure we've stated from an MBT perspective, anything that's implicit, we've made explicit, basically. We very much, team-based approach, which is why we're very keen on AMBIT. The central role of supervision, again, we're very, very keen on AMBIT, as I've said, about data collection, and sort of how do you keep some fidelity, but still allowing flexibility as well. Again, just to, like all services, we actually have a wide range of theoretical frameworks. And again, we're quite explicit actually about what they are. Again, nothing unusual. We have a 6-week assessment and engagement period. Basically, we use a range of case management and intervention. So we're not a specific MBT service. Everyone's been MBT trained, and we use a lot of mentalising thinking and interventions, but AMBIT certainly is the framework that holds us together. So why did we choose actually MBT and AMBIT? Well, clearly it's evidence-based treatment. This slide I showed to the people above me and above them as well. It's integrative. We find very useful engagement because it targets epistemic trust quite overtly, the mentalising approach. A mentalising team, and actually we can run groups. We're running a parenting group, actually have done for a year, basically. Okay, skip that. So again, one of the things that we find helpful is how do you embed something? It's by actually, we found making something that clinicians find help and clients can use on a day-by-day basis. Yeah, and it's actually applicable to their clinical work. It's just not a theory. So very much Anthony Boatman, we've had training with him 3 times now over the last 5 years. And last time he was out, he was very much helping us think about from day one, targeting epistemic trust when we're meeting these high-risk kids and having the stance of can we find a way of thinking together and asking the client to and write it down in bullet point jointly with them and ask them to bring it back as well. Okay. So I mentioned about managing upwards, and unfortunately it does mean over here it's important that we know what the jargon is, the relevant state and national policies. And having an elevator pitch, and literally I did have to use the following slide in elevators at times, just to clearly communicate, look, when we first set up, what does AMIOS do? Being proactive in communication from day one, we've sent very quarterly reports to central office. They weren't asking us for it, but we were just overt. And it was very helpful and has been very helpful for us being able to collect data and, are we making a difference, which we've been able to show. And also, one of the strengths, I can guarantee you there's certain meetings I go to where I definitely do a thinking together before I go to the meeting, basically. The importance of us trying to maintain our mentalisation in the midst of some meetings which there's a lot of pressure on us to not maintain our mentalisation, basically. Okay. But the elevator pitch, I actually said, I've been, the one I used for years was just 2. One is we're here to try and reduce risk and increase safety, and also increase the chance that our adolescents and families will engage with non-ambulatory services after they leave us. So that was just the pitch, is the bottom line. So we reduce risk, we aim to reduce risk, increase engagement with therapy and treatment. As I mentioned, improve engagement with other support services and also post-discharge. So the very relevance of targeting epistemic trust over the 2 years they're with us. Trying to improve functioning of high-risk adolescents and, as I said, establish epistemic trust. Oops, so there we go. Now, I've mentioned I do supervision fortnightly with every site. It is mostly by BC. It's a combination of AMBIT supervision, MBT, clinical supervision, and a discussion in a mentalising way of the elephants in the room that are occurring in each site, be it within each team or actually, so in their district as well, and also what the learnings are. So we actively do, in supervision, do thinking together. We do disintegration grids. We do the active planning and holding the balance. And we think about literally for cases, what are the epistemic trust dot points at the moment? In Brisbane in particular, we watch videos. We do MBT, sort of supervision, so watching videos. And also as I said, we do a reflective discussion on local dilemmas, but there's also the statewide perspective because I supervise everyone in the state as well. Okay. There is a sense of connection supporting the 14 teams. We have quarterly video conference statewide meetings and annual face-to-face, though we're not sure if we can do that this year, meeting. There's a budding of sites when new sites start and budding of workers. And we utilise statewide the AMBIT exercises in our annual planning days to sort of support, in particular, thinking about what perceptions do we have of other services and actually what perception do we have of ourselves as well. I think that's been a very useful thing for us. We're very keen on promoting a learning culture. And again, that's what AMBIT's appealed to us about. And I won't go through these, but these are just sort of from a talk 2 years ago when we were just reflecting in a grand round some of the learnings that we've actually had statewide. We've actually done a number of projects over the last year, including a peer worker project. And it's interesting, this is just a cut and paste from a presentation from the peer workers presentation. They've said Kim's and AMIOS leadership has offered guidance about the framework for the project while demonstrating trust and courage by allowing the peer work team scope to develop and implement the program from a lived experience perspective. So that issue about the style of leadership, we've actually developed. We've had a research project where we've got feedback from our main referrers, and we actively sort of measure staff satisfaction as well. Some of the local adaptations that we've done here, AMBIT-wise, is we actually try and do MBTF formulations actually with quite a few of our cases, and one of our workers developed this visual tool, basically, which actually Anthony now actually uses in trainings, basically. So it's just a visualization of really the main headings on a mentalising formulation. Because that would be, we just developed our own thinking together pictures, basically, which Liz and Laura encourages to do in training. On the case conference wall, as I said, we talk about mentalising. We have, mentalise aloud my colleagues to learn first, before I before I slip into problem solving. But we actually think about what is the purpose or question for our client's review today. Like, why am I presenting this case? What have we learned about the client's family system in the last 6 weeks? Does what we learn change our formulation and our plan, and what input would be helpful from the team? And when we're discharging patients, we try and reflect about what do we do well, what were the challenges, could we have done things differently, and what did we learn? So almost finished. The current innovations including, we're actually, for the very high risk hyper-aroused attachment system complex trauma patients, we're actually using 2 clinicians in a session. It's sort of an extension of a live thinking together with the patient's presence. Increasing the use of MPT formulations and focused nervous trust from the start of connection, including system issues and by this integration grid in the initial 6-week assessment, and include the KIMS district management in our grid, thinking about sort of what their view is. We do think about, as Liz has said, what is our sphere of influence, because it helps set our boundaries. We just sort of think about what can we influence at the moment, and actually sometimes we actually can't influence certain things, or it's going to take a while. As I said, we include district management disintegration group, and we're doing the parenting groups. We're spreading the word, basically. So we've been doing introductory AMBIT presentations to the statewide annual Forum for Child Protection, paediatricians and health workers, to 5 of our KIMS outside of Brisbane. And they're actually KIMS that are linked to our AMIOS teams. So it's sort of actually spreading it with sort of where AMIOS is located. So we've incorporated we've incorporated the disintegration group into our district-wide complex case processes. We are wanting to AMBIT manualise more regularly. And as a segue to Arun, actually Jacaranda's place started, and sort of I had the honour and pleasure of actually being involved in AMBIT training of Arun's team. Arun, over to you.
I'm just going to butt in for a moment. Thank you very much, Michael. There are a couple of things, just in case anybody listening wasn't sure what they were. One person asked what an elevator pitch is, and if you look on the question and answer, you'll see a really good response. But really, it's about using the time when you're in an elevator with someone. You've maybe got 30 seconds before they get off at the next floor to pitch your idea. So it's really an exercise in being very succinct in articulating to kind of define a bit was epistemic trust for people that aren't as familiar with that. Really, it can be thought of as a particular type of trust in help, in the extent to which someone might be helpful to us, and what research has sort of suggested triggers that kind of trust in help, or trust in someone's ability to help you, is the extent to which you feel that they have understood you. So in terms of mentalizing, we can think of that as a kind of a trigger for this kind of particular type of trust, that then someone feels open to be able to receive help. I just thought I guess the guys in the chat box can put some links to some more information about epistemic trust, if that's helpful. Sorry, I will butt out again now. Arun, it would be great to hear about your work.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Michael. I'll just get my slide shared, hopefully. Yeah. Thank you. Hope you can see my slides. So I'm the medical director at Jacaranda Place, which is essentially the campus-based service of Michael's extended community-based team. So AMIOS is our community-based service, and Jacaranda Place is the campus-based subacute service. And it came from the same inquiry that Michael talked about, and it's first of its kind in Australia in the sense that it's the first subacute unit which sort of integrates education and concepts of co-design with consumers and carers, and has got an on-site day program along with it. And so in a lot of ways, it's a new model, which is not sort of with no clear, I guess, roadmaps from previous services in Australia. When the service was thought about and conceptualized, there was extensive co-design process with consumers, carers, Department of Education, and Queensland Health. So it's been a long process. So while the inquiry happened and AMIOS started 5 years ago, developing Jacaranda Place took 5 years of planning and co-design and building. And so it's a brand new building, brand new team that sort of come up, and we started having young people admitted to the subacute unit from 18th of May. So very new team. And it essentially has got three components. So we've got the statewide adolescent subacute inpatient unit. Then we have Jacaranda Place day program, which is, because being a day program, is restricted to northern suburbs of Brisbane. And then what we have, we call Jacaranda Place training and learning, which is essentially a training and learning platform which uses principles of Recovery College and ECHO. Now ECHO is a telehealth mentoring program that was sort of started from University of New Mexico, and I guess sort of Recovery College. The concept of Recovery College comes from UK, and it's again sort of that co-designed training program. When it comes to referral to Jacaranda Place, any CAMS or KIMS services within Queensland can refer, or a private psychiatrist would be able to refer. Our age group is similar to, as Michael described, between 13 to 18, but it can go up to 21 depending on developmental needs. But we do believe that the gap in service when it comes to residential programs are between 13 to 16 predominantly in Queensland, and so we are sort of hoping for it to sort of stick between 13 and 19 as our age group. We kind of thought about the referral criteria should be fairly simple. So it's essentially any young person who's got serious and complex mental health needs, and those needs are not being able to met in their current continuum of mental health care. And this is very important for Queensland, because what we have in Brisbane is very different from what might be in a town northwest of Queensland. And so while the needs of the young person in Brisbane can be very much met with community services or availability of AMIOS, somebody from a small town in northwest of Queensland may not have those services, so they may be able to come down to Jacaranda Place. And we expect that the young person who's coming down should have some willingness to engage with the recovery model of care. And all our referrals are monitored by a statewide referral and review panel, which is chaired by me, but includes psychiatrists from across the state, so that we can maintain a statewide perspective for the service. Model of care, just briefly, again, it was developed in partnership with principles of partnership and co-design. We had a number of workshops, including consumer carer groups, education, health, universities, to sort of think about how do we help this group of young people who have been possibly engaging with mental health services for a long period of time, but still find themselves quite stuck in where they are, not just from a mental health perspective, but predominantly from functional perspective and developmentally as well. So the model of care has been developed in partnership, and we focus on establishing what we call as therapeutic partnerships. And it's a bit of a play in a word, but what it means is essentially, along with shared formulations, shared treatment goals and treatment plan, we think about how do we empower our young person and families? How do we empower for them to be experts in being able to understand their needs, communicate their needs, and advocate for their needs? Because we do believe that Jacaranda Place, an admission to a subacute unit can be there for, sort of say, 4 to 6 months, and their needs are going to far exceed that. So if we can empower them to be able to advocate for themselves or communicate their needs better, we think they may likely to have better outcomes. And we constantly focused on how can our help be more meaningful. Again, this comes from that assumption that all of these young people are referred to us after having extensive contact with quite well-established mental health services, and they're still stuck. So how do we make that shift? How do we tap into improving their epistemic trust? How do we address that? And we do have a clear focus on functional gain. So it's along with individual and group therapies, we do offer a certificate program in hospitality. We have a certificate program in barista or food services. And we are hoping to expand into certificate programs in horticulture or beekeeping and tap into that developmental sort of drive in a child to learn or a young person to learn. So offering sort of skill development along with mental health intervention. And sometimes I get actually using the skill development to engage them with the mental health process, because they're kind of, there's that degree of lack of epistemic trust in health services, or their experience of mental health services has not been welcoming or meaningful for them. So we're trying to kind of undo some of the things that may have happened in their past. And staffing model, I must say, the core design process, while it's quite lengthy, it actually has given us a fairly well-resourced service. So we have 2 full-time equivalents of child psychiatrists, which is job shared with 3 of us, including me. And we have a 0.2 developmental pediatrician, a couple of registrars, which are essentially psychiatry trainees or advanced trainees in child psychiatry. We've got 30 nursing staff, including our director of nursing and nurse unit manager. We've got 5 positions for consumer and carer consultants, which includes both the consumer consultant as well as carer consultants. From allied health perspective, we have 2 each of psychology, speech pathology, OT, social work, exercise physiologist, music therapist, art therapist, dietitian, and pharmacist. So we kind of get the full complement, I think. As education staff, we have 5 teachers, 2 teachers aide, and a guidance officer. So they are part of Queensland Education Queensland, so they're not health staff. And then we have our administrative staff, operational staff, and security staff. And the reason being, even though we are based within the campus of a major hospital, we are pretty much standalone for all pragmatic purpose. So we have our own security and operational staff as well. Then looking at AMBIT at Jacaranda Place, because we really wanted something that would offer us a systemic approach in understanding these complex systems, because our young people they have their own mental health service that's referring them. They are likely to be engaged with child protection services. They are likely to be having difficulties with schooling. They are likely to be engaged with Department of Justice. And how do we engage with these complex systems, and how do we understand them? And I think AMBIT really gives us a framework in helping us do that. The other thing we think AMBIT offers us is the ability to be flexible. So we would like to be flexible in matching the needs of the young person who comes to us and matching the expectation of the service who's referring to us. It's interesting, regional and remote service will have quite a different expectation from us to an AMIOS, which is based in Brisbane, which is well-resourced. So how do we be flexible, and how do we have a framework to be flexible? Because if you don't have the frame, I think you're likely to get into chaos, trying to be everything for everybody. So I think AMBIT really grounds us in being able to do that. And then obviously Michael talked about the team approach and learning organization. That's fundamental for us to have that. We don't want inpatient units particularly have this tendency to kind of split into nursing teams and allied health or being medically driven. We clearly want to sort of avoid that. And learning is, it's not just evidence-based, it's also around what are the needs in the community where the young person is coming from. So learning about what's happening there, because these young people have to go back to their community and be able to have a meaningful life back home. And how do we understand that? And then consistency, because the community-based program led by Michael's already using AMIO, so it sort of makes sense for the inpatient part to have AMBIT as well. So that's kind of been our thought around having AMBIT as our theoretical framework. delivery of AMBIT, and big thanks to Michael and Narelle. They sort of helped us train all our staff. So onboarding a big new team, which had never worked together, we decided to have a 6-week orientation program, and AMBIT training was delivered on week 2 and week 6, so as 2 separate training programs. And we included all our staff. So it was not just clinical staff. We actually included education staff, operational staff, administrative staff, and security staff into AMBIT training. And I really think Michael did a really great job in sort of being able to have a program for clinicians and then having sort of a different program for non-clinical staff, because while we want to share the same language, it can look different for non-clinical and clinical staff as well. And then we did that during the time of COVID, but I must say, on reflection, COVID didn't really have a massive impact on us for a few reasons. I think Australia started social distancing rules quite early on and managed things quite well. But we also, the building is massive. It's the footprint of the building is as big as a footy field. And we do have multiple rooms which do have video conferencing facilities. So we were able to split our teams into different rooms and socially distance and still run kind of a hybrid face-to-face / online model of training. So the first training was on week 2, which didn't have a COVID impact, and COVID then came after that. And possibly the biggest impact from COVID perspective was that a lot of our recruitment got slowed down. So new staff members who were hoping to be started on week 3 and week 4 just couldn't join us. So the numbers were probably a bit low for the second training session. So we are holding another training within the coming weeks for those staff who missed out. And finally, moving forward, we have fortnightly AMBIT supervision. So what we have done is we have organized 4 time slots in a fortnight that staff can register in for, and that is to kind of capture particularly nursing staff who do shift work. I provide that supervision, and then I get supervision from Michael. So it's sort of been trying to develop our workforce within AMBIT and make them confident in being able to use AMBIT. We've been exploring opportunities for further facilitator and supervisor training. Our aim is to develop kind of a group of AMBIT champions within our service, so that can be, so that we can sustainably maintain AMBIT when new staff come on board, and then ongoing training for new staff. So that's, again, we have booked one in within the next week or 2 for Michael to sort of train new staff that have joined since the initial training program. So that's sort of briefly about AMBIT at Jacaranda Place. I mean, this is very brief, cut down version, but happy to discuss further with questions. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Michael and Aaron, for sharing. It's just wonderful to hear about services. I think what you've done is and have achieved over a number of years is huge. We're talking about making influencing change across the local system. Actually, you've influenced change not just in the local system, but actually in quite a wide geographical area. We have got some questions, I think, and James can help us with thinking about those. I just wondered if either of you could say, if there are people listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, where on earth would I start in sort of trying to have something like a unified approach over a large number of services like this? What if there were sort of 3 things that you think have been absolutely vital to I'm putting you on the spot slightly here, but 3 things that have been really vital to making this work, and clearly it's been a number of years of work.
I'd be interested in Arun's thought. Look, the punchlines would be, one is, 3 things is be patient. I mean, it takes, as you picked up, this has been 5 years sort of thing, and it will keep on happening. Look, you need a champion, and you need a champion in the right position, if possible. Because secondly, you sort of need interest and support of staff on the ground and supporting them. And thirdly, you need to work on getting support of people above you as well, in a sense. So, and that's sort of what my talk was sort of targeting in a sense. So it's several levels, I think, to do. And what actually has happened is sort of what, as Arun's sort of said, is when people do start, and yeah, we started small. We had to. I mean, the way it was rolled out is we started in 3, so apart from the room I was in, we started with half teams in 3 sites, and the word spread. And now we're being approached by other teams about, tell us more about AMBIT, in a sense. Okay, so it's sort of also that too. Arun, I'd be interested in your thoughts.
I think the only thing I would add, Michael, is that from what we found with Jacaranda Place particularly was the consumer care partnership. And I think there is a lot of merit in, as professionals we can lobby, but when it comes to consumer groups and carer groups being able to lobby, the political influence that those groups carry actually quite significant in securing resources. It's not just with AMBIT. When it came to kind of with the building design and getting furnishing for the building, consumer groups would put their hand up and say, no, that's not acceptable. That's what you do for a nursing home. That's not good for a facility that wants to admit young people long term, and that gets done. Whereas if it was me trying to sort out those, never going to happen. So I think having consumer groups and getting them on board with the journey right from the beginning has been quite a useful process for us.
James, and I saw you were nodding there.
Yeah, no, I was nodding away. I just wanted to say it's fascinating to hear some detail about what you guys have been doing over in Queensland. And yeah, there's a couple of things I wanted to bring out, and one of them was that this idea of consensus. What seemed to come across is that it might seem like a basic thing, but you were all fairly agreed that this was a good idea, and that's that can be really important as a starting point, I guess. The other bit that I just thought was interesting, although yes, you certainly can start things small, and that seems like you kind of grew. There was a kind of a top-up approach. It seems quite clear as well that you're in a way quite privileged, as we are generally in the global north, to have quite kind of solid structures in order to kind of centralize things and use things in that way. So I wondered if you'd felt that having the kind of statewide kind of leadership was actually something that was key to kind of bringing and implementing AMBIT across quite a complex mental health network and beyond that as well.
Yes is the short answer, for multiple reasons. Partly when I say political, I mean that's where decisions are made, but also it does allow some fidelity to the model and as well, and so people get, I guess, therefore it does help the spread of it as well. So I guess, yeah, so the state, we couldn't have done it without the statewide positions, and also, yeah, we're so spread out here, we've had to have the central stuff, historically anyway. So yeah, I get what you're saying. This would be much harder to have done if we didn't have those established sort of ways of the central ways. Having said that though, you're balancing that all the time with local issues and local management as well. So it's actually getting that balance right, because a disadvantage, local health services don't always appreciate central office commenting on things. So you sort of have to have relationships with both. Is that fair enough? It's actually both levels are important.
Yeah, I think that's something I would share in my experience of trying something a lot less successfully, I would add, rather than you guys in a London borough. But one of the things I wanted to maybe add as well is that we talk a lot about in kind of generally mentalizing, but in AMBIT about being kind of curious and not particularly certain about things. And I think one of the things when you're thinking about implementation is that you actually have to shift sometimes into a bit of a non-mentalizing stance to say, actually, we're quite certain that these ideas are both helpful, and here's why, and be quite evidence-based about why you think they're important. And it sounded a little bit to me that you were doing a bit of that when you were saying, in your kind of snappy kind of actual elevator pitch, that you were kind of actually doing that a little bit, and you were kind of, you know, with confidence, obviously you, but others as well, through their own experience, actually saying this could be helpful, and we've experienced this to be helpful.
And that's I agree, James, with that's actually the importance of collecting data. Because we now, like we've seen over 800 kids statewide, so we've got massive data with good outcomes. So, you know, in a sense, so we're able to say, okay, so this model we're saying central has been very helpful in these outcomes. So I would actually stress at a systems level, the collecting, and Arun's doing this too, so the collecting data to sort of demonstrate. But yeah.
Going back to a kind of a curious sense, I'm really interested to know if you found the language of disintegration helpful when you were both thinking about how AMBIT works with these systems, because it's one of the things that really attracted me to AMBIT as a commissioner and as a manager, because my experience of working in these systems is that at their resting point, that AMBIT is very explicit about, systems of care and of help are actually disintegrated. So, you know, I'm sure you've got that sense of, you know, how working in a social care or social work environment compared to a health environment can often be, you can be at loggerheads, but the child, the adolescent, the adult is in the middle there trying to access that help, or we still have a duty to try and access that person. So I was wondering about that, if that made sense.
I want to give Arun a chance to talk here.
Yeah, and absolutely, I agree. I think, you know, it's interesting that we have education staff and health staff within our service, and even the way, you know, those two departments work is quite different, and it is disintegrated. You know, we don't have access to, you know, any of their information, and they don't have access to our information. And even child protection laws, how education would interpret that is very different from how health would interpret that. I guess this is, you know, that's why I think AMBIT so useful in trying to be able to think about it, you know, because I think we can get into this tendency of the fact that everybody's speaking the same language, and that's not the case. Yeah, I think that really is the most important part of AMBIT, I feel, you know, working with complex systems, that thinking about systems being disintegrated and disconnected, and the young person and families who sometimes are, you know, so disadvantaged that they don't understand that, you know, and they get frustrated, which then adds on to that, you know, lack of trust towards, you know, health agencies, educational agencies, and stops them from being able to seek help. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and I agree with that very much. I think, in fact, the more we use the disintegration grid, the more we're using it, by the way, too. Look, the other thing is, I think it goes hand in hand, though, with thinking, how do you also build epistemic trust, in a sense, which I frankly think is actually what the disintegration grid's trying to do within the system as well. So I think upfronting both of them and stressing both of them, I think, is very core, you know, at all levels, actually. So
we've got some great questions actually from the attendees, and I'm worried that we might not be able to cover them all before we have to finish. But I know that Rebecca and James and Dickon have been doing a great job responding to people in the chat. But we had a couple of questions I thought would be really helpful if we could just really briefly cover. So Beverly was asking, and Arun, you sort of, you referred to this briefly, I think, but about how you're working with child protection services and youth justice systems with AMBIT. How are you working with your relationship with those services?
So we just started that, you know, we're only starting to get referrals from child protection and young people who have been involved with justice systems. And it's again, you know, being able to start with a stakeholder meeting with a clear, at least from our perspective, having that clear mentalizing, that thinking that, okay, we are going to, what we use is a structure of thinking together in a meeting, in the sense that we would sort of come in and sort of say, this is the frame, we have, say, half an hour for this meeting, let's sort of mark the task of what would we like to get out of this, and sort of going around and listening to everybody, as in what would they want from this meeting, because the expectations are quite different. For example, with child safety, it may be that we have a referral where they are struggling to find placement for the young person. And then they're sort of saying, we can't find placement because of mental health needs, so we would want them admitted to Jacaranda Place. And we are then kind of saying, okay, yep, good idea, admission to Jacaranda Place can be useful, but then without having stable accommodation to go back to, what are we then working with? So it's sort of using that, I guess, marking the task and trying to mentalize where they're coming from, their perspective, their lack of resources, and sort of, that, I guess, helps them. That helps us validate them. Otherwise, I think we can get into the system of, oh, this is what I can offer, you don't understand us, and we continue and amplify that disintegration that exists. So I guess what AMBIT does, it gives us a structure to mentalize and think about that from their perspective. And while we may not be able to do a lot more, but we can probably, contain them by doing that, and have a better outcome in being able to think together.
Thank you.
Michael, you had something more to add to that?
Well, the only thing I'd add too is I agree very much. Two things is the issues and challenges, etc., are the same here as you guys have too within the complex system. So it's sort of we're not going to say anything different, I think, to what you guys would say actually. And so I do think there's times also that the concept of being aware of what your AMBIT is, like what can I actually meaningfully, or what would help. Like we may not be able to bring this system yet, onto the same page, but actually what there's limits to what we can do, but let's think meaningfully about what would be helpful to do. I think that's the other thing I had as well. Yeah.
I think one of the questions I sort of asked, hopefully at the beginning, was which bits of our work do we value and which do we measure? And actually, a lot of what you've been telling us about has been for the young person's benefit, but not just about the face-to-face work. That actually a lot of effort has been going into those conversations and relationships with professionals, both sort of upwards and downwards, and then with other agencies. And it sounds like that work is valued. I think someone said in the chat box that it seems like commissioners are really only interested in the hours that you've spent face-to-face, but it seems that you've been putting a lot of value on the other bits of work and how they ultimately help the young person.
Yeah, and there's sort of one of the things we're having a statewide perspective is what's very clear is the existing relationships that are vary between the sites, between the different major players, and when there's established epistemic trust, etc., it makes a world of difference. So in fact, it's very worthwhile, the relationship aspect, in a sense. Look, we don't live in, I think Arun and I probably sort of, we don't want to make it sound too that it's just been a straightforward path. We strike the same issues you do with management, in a sense. And I think that's partly what I was meaning about. Sometimes just it takes time at times, and also it takes being strategic, and also just persisting, in a sense, is the other issue. So this it just actually takes time, but it's worth doing, basically. So.
Thank you. We've come to the end of our time, and it feels like there's lots more that we could chat about. And actually, Beth in the chat box there has just asked, is there a way that we could set up some kind of sort of virtual coffee house where we could have a regular meeting where we'd be able to discuss this? And actually, that is something that at the centre we're experimenting with at the moment, that we might sort of have an online group where we could host conversations where there's a lot more interaction. So I would say sign up to our Helping People with Multiple Needs newsletter and you'll hear more about that. But I think it would be really great to, once we've got that set up, to kind of be able to have more conversations about this, because Michael and Aaron, you probably haven't had a chance to see, but you know, there's comments, people are really interested in what you've been telling us about, and finding it quite inspiring in terms of thinking about their systems wherever they are in the world. So we are recording this, so we will publish that on the Twitter, and it'll go out in the next newsletter as well. If you want to sign up to the newsletter and you're not already, you can go to tinyurl.com/multiple needs, and you'll get a sign up form there. So we really hope to see you next time. These are fortnightly on a Thursday. But thank you so much to everybody for coming, and particularly to Michael and Aaron for being frankly heroic at what is now 3:30 in the morning. Yeah, thank you ever so much. Good night. Well, good morning. I don't know.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz. It's probably good morning.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.